Welcome. This is today's episode. The USA is doomed. Why? Because the majority of Americans say the country can't be fixed. We're going to do a deep dive and explain what happened and what this means. So the first thing you need to know is that Charlie Kirk passed away. He was assassinated. That is not productive, and I condemn it. But we're not really talking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're talking about the wake of his assassination. It wasn't the day after his assassination that divided America. It was 2 to 3 weeks to 4 weeks after he died. What happened was that Charlie Kirk died. And a lot of liberals, not all, celebrated his death. That really upset a lot of conservatives, who then said, well, if you're celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, we don't like that. And you have to mourn him the way that we say, which is you can't bring up anything bad about him, even if he said it himself. Just total silence and acceptance that he was a great guy. Liberals didn't really buy that. And so now you have the right, who is deeply offended at the left for laughing about Kirk's funeral and not celebrating the death they want. And you have the left upset at the right for being told, here's what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, and you better stay in line. So both groups have reasons to be upset at the other. And in that wake, there was a new poll by the New York Times. Here's a little bit of it. And by the way, you may want to pause and then rewind this video. I'm going to do a really fast dive, but a lot of more source material is in all the slides there. They'll give you even more information. So poll came out. 2/3 of Americans, and here's the original New York Times article, now say that America can't be fixed. That's right, 2/3 of Americans. By the way, in 2020, it was about 42% of Americans who said the country can't be saved, and 2/3 thought it could be saved. And yet in 5 years, from 2020 to 2025, we've now gone to 64% who say the country can't be saved. For all you skeptics, this is the bylines: Black, white, Asian, young, middle-aged, elderly, babies, Republicans, Democrats, independents, women, men, the South, the North. Every breakdown, everybody had this opinion. It is 2/3 for every breakdown of every group is that they think America can't be fixed. Now, there's some groups who think it's even worse, but everybody's at 2/3. Here's the poll that they showed. And what you'll see going back to 2020, at least according to this poll, is it looks around 2/3 thought there were problems with it coming together, and we're still there 5 years later. So we did this breakdown here. You'll notice that after January 6th, polarization, people who thought the country could not come back jumped to 75, 76% after January 6th. But then it came back down with the economy opening up after COVID. There were some warm feelings there. We can look at the right, and you can see that when Donald Trump was almost assassinated, there was a reducing of the polarization a little bit, a tiny amount, maybe 5 to 7 points, and then it jumped right back to 58%. So 2/3 seems to be the way that most Americans feel across all groups in the wake of Charlie Kirk's funeral. Well, that's not all. Here's another thing that poll showed. Polarization has now gone up in just the last 2 years. It's jumped ahead of the failure of democracy and the Republican Party becoming into an authoritarian party. Polarization now has jumped ahead of those two issues and has almost doubled in importance in just the last 2 years. Remember, this was part of this New York Times poll. That's not the only poll. We're looking at the CBS News poll around the same time, the wake of Charlie Kirk's funeral. About 68% of Americans think that violence will increase. Here's where it gets interesting. 62%, again, 2/3, thinks that people can get along, but politics drives them apart. Now, when you look at people who actually spend time talking to the other side, it's only 10%. About 12% of people spend time with the other side online, and about 9% in person. So about 10% actually spend time significantly with the other side. So yeah, politics drives everybody apart. Who's actually working across the aisle to fix this? 10% and no more. And 2/3 violence is going to get worse. That's not alone. Here's another poll by NPR showing increased support for violence. Democrats grew from 12 to 28%, Republicans 28 to 31, and independents 18 to 25. Now, certainly Democrats grew the most, but independents grew 7 points and Republicans grew 3 points. So everybody's supporting more violence in the wake of Charlie Kirk's funeral. And finally, here's a more longitudinal timeline that shows you from the 1980s to 2024. It's from the Ames Public Research. That is the definitive guide for most political scientists. And it's showing you that polarization has only increased. It was kind of normal around Clinton, started to diverge around Bush, massively diverged around Obama, then Trump, then Biden, then Trump again. Massive division over a 40-year time frame. Now, when we're talking about people who think violence may increase, here's another poll, interesting report that came out. About 40% of Democrats, according to the New York Times in June 2025, were willing to use force, and roughly about 40%, 1/3 of Republicans, according to that article from the Washington Post on January 1st, 2022, will believe that violence is an acceptable thing. Now, don't be totally surprised. Here is a poll that I used a lot, and this came from 2021, and this shows that 4/5 of all Democrats and all Republicans view everyone on the other side, whether they're a member or a politician, as an existential threat to America. So about 75% to 80% of Biden and Trump voters view every voter and every politician as an existential threat, language typically used for a Russian nuclear attack. Now, just to show you that the polls aren't alone, this is a sample of comments taken in the wake of Charlie Kirk's funeral. All of these are conservatives who say we cannot coexist with the left. Can't do it. So at the same time, they're saying 2/3 of America thinks division is too great to overcome. Here is people, regular people, saying the same thing. There's Matt Walsh with 6 million views. Some of these have 200,000 or a couple million views. Bunch of regular folks saying we cannot coexist with the left. This is people on the right. Now, here's people on the left on MSNBC. And what are they saying? A mirror was held up to the country and it looks ugly. And there's another person saying, I don't know if we've been more divided than we've ever been recently. So there's our 2 liberal commentators on a major liberal network saying, wow, it looks like the country is ripped apart. All in the wake of Charlie Kirk's funeral. Not alone. Here's a smash of 6 different podcasts. There's the titles, all around the same time, all saying, maybe America's too divided and it can't come back together. Here's another selection. That is Fox News correspondents on top and Professor Carr on the bottom. So the one on top is a conservative show. The one on the bottom is liberal. And the one on the top shows Megyn Kelly saying, can't work with the left. And the guy on the right is saying, what if things get worse? And she goes, I don't care. Can't work with the left at all. Can't come together. Can't work with them. Can't make it united. Now, here's liberals on the bottom part saying, can America be saved? And then they asked, should America be saved? Just like these liberals are asking, can it be saved? Higher level. And that's mostly just because people were really polarized about Charlie Kirk. Marjorie Taylor Greene got in on it. But that's not where it all ends. The fact is that America was divided for a long time. Most people will blame it on social media. They will not look at the big source. So if you go back to 1992, 1/3 of all American counties didn't swing Republican or Democrat. They would go one or to another. All of the red is a county where it's majority Republicans win all the time. Almost always somebody in that county wins and they're a Republican. If you look at the blue, that's almost always someone in that county wins. It's a Democrat. Now, in 1992, most of the map was gray. Look at the map on 2012. The gray's almost wiped out. It's all red and blue. So we went from independent, I don't really have a preference for Democrat or Republican in 92, to almost all of America was a hardcore red or hardcore blue county. And here's news from 2022 from NPR showing that the big sort has continued. Also, the Virginia Center for Politics said the same thing. In the top right corner, you can see a chart showing the increase in counties that are called landslide election counties. Around 2002, it just took off. and it grew from about 5 to 20%. So most of the country's polarized, and this trend has continued. These are people who are moving from liberal cities to conservative areas, or conservatives who are leaving liberal cities and moving to conservative areas. So people are sorting themselves out physically, not just online. Nobody talks about this. Everybody talks about social media and how it's making everybody aggravated. People have been sorting themselves out into like-minded political communities and moving away and not interacting with the other side since the 1990s. It's only increased, according to these maps, to 2012. Also actually goes up to now. And that makes this statistic come into play. Hey, politics keeps us apart. Okay, but how much do you actually spend time with the other person? 10%. Makes sense when you see the big sort map. By the way, no politicians will talk about this, nor will they deal with this. To make matters worse, Texas has decided that they wanted to redistrict so that there would be 5 more Republicans in Congress after the midterms. This has terrified liberals and California. This has caused the governor of California to say there may not be an election in 2028 because the elections may be rigged for the midterms because of what Texas is doing. He's not alone. Barack Obama, a former president, has now said, California, the whole nation is counting on you. If California can't redistrict opposite of Texas to negate the 5 increased Republican seats, America is over. Here's Barack Obama in these commercials saying, California, it's up to you to save the entire country. That's how bad it is. Governor saying there will not be an election in 2028. That's never happened before. President saying it's up to one state to save the entire union. Because what's happening is people are trying to rig the midterms, and that's never happened either. Here's some other things that have never happened in California. Marines sent against domestic protesters. National Guard troops sent against the will of the governor. You got to go back to 1954 to find that, or 64 with Johnson. Also, Donald Trump said that he would arrest Governor Newsom. And he sent Border Patrol agents to surround a meeting with the governor right after he threatened to arrest him. And Trump said that he's not really going to give fire aid for the victims. And Newsom was saying he is abandoning fellow Americans. Additionally, Trump also shot artillery shells over the 5 freeway. So, mobilizes combat tank troops against us. National Guard duty, haven't seen that since the 60s. Does not want to give disaster assistance to fellow Americans. That's never happened. Threatened to arrest a sitting governor. You got to go back to the Civil War. Shows military to surround the governor to intimidate him. That's the Civil War. You got to go back, or it never happened. And shoots artillery shells as a show of force in the state of California when we didn't want that. You got to go back to the Civil War. So none of these things have happened in a long time. They're all happening now under Trump. They're all horrible, and they all break conditions of normalcy. Also, Justice Trump also said U.S. cities should be military training grounds. And about 100 U.S. citizens have been held, kicked, dragged, detained, disappeared by Donald Trump. All of this has led to massive speculation that maybe California should leave. Here's the Atlantic magazine, the top policy magazine in America. All the top politicians and political thinkers look at it. If California is not getting disaster aid, but is getting hostile deployments of federal troops, Californians might find it harder to see what's in it for them. This is the top policy magazine in America saying, when you do all of this to California, maybe there's no point in them thinking that they're fellow Americans and part of the state. As Newsom said, he's abandoning fellow Americans. And as I like to say, where was the Republican outrage at Trump doing any of these things to Californians? Never happened. Maybe that's why 48% of Republicans view all Californians as not American. That's our update, and we'll see you soon.